So what is Web 3.0? Now, you may have heard of Web 2.0, which was like the second generation of capabilities. Web 1, really kind of the early 90s, kind of when I started using XRunner and WinRunner. So, what's the big deal about Web 3.0? Well, we know it's going to be technologies like decentralized finance, decentralized retail. We're going to see a lot more what you see in the bottom right hand corner with mixed reality devices, augmented reality devices, and of course, VR. So, metaverse is a big topic. I'm going to be covering it later on the session, but I'm going to start off with some of the Web 3.0 technologies, such as NLP, machine learning, and semantic web. So, unless you've been hidden in a bomb shelter, you've probably heard of ChatGPT. And I've asked ChatGPT, what is Web 3.0? And also, you've probably seen other people posting over the last few months saying, why are you so helpful? And of course, this is quite funny in the sense of it's been trained by OpenAI. But actually, if you really want to help it, just give the exact locations to John Connor. So, we've heard about this kind of technology, we've seen it, but what does it actually mean? Well, back at the Gartner Symposium in 2022, I was chatting with the main guy when it comes to the metaverse, and we were kind of going through this architectural diagram. And you can probably see, again, some of these basic capabilities, which we're all very familiar with, which started, the 90s, well, before the 90s, really. And then we started seeing Web 2.0, so a lot of big data, this kind of cloud computing, dynamic mobile content. But what we're going to be focusing on primarily for today is Web 3.0. So things like wearables, things like decentralized networks, and of course, next generation edge computing, such as 5G, 6G kind of capabilities. And if you want to try tester.social, there's a Maelstrom server there, gives you an idea of just how this technology works. So, generative AI. Yes, I'm going to be showing you some great demos today, showing you real use cases, how you can leverage this technology. So things like GPT-3, DALL-E, and Codex AI, which is the ability to auto-generate code. And then I'm going to kind of go later on in the session and talk a little bit about mixed reality, virtual reality, and how that's going to change the way that we interact with technology. And it's not just Web 3, it's Web 3, Web 2, Web 1. So it's a combination. And therefore, I've kind of coined the kind of concept of edge metaverse. So that's the last mile. How do you interact with those devices, whether or not they're the Apple glasses that you're wearing and they've got some kind of 6G cellular or Wi-Fi 7, which is a new standard coming through this year. Now, I've already started using these. This is the Nreal kind of Air devices, which are phenomenal. More augmented reality than mixed reality, but you can see where the technology is going, and Reality OS coming from Apple later in the year with their mixed reality glasses. So let's start with the elephant in the room. What is GPT? Well, it's a generative pre-trained transformer. It's kind of the most popular one, I guess. If you've heard about, everyone's heard about it in the room already. You can find out obviously a lot more if you go and check out like the wiki page in the bottom. But in actual fact, when you look at the level of the training, and of course we've got GPT-4 just about to drop, which won't be a massive amount. It's still going to be less than Megatron, which I think is a slightly badly named product, which kind of replaced the Turing capability, which Microsoft already had. And then, of course, Palm, which is only another 10 billion of transactions, has managed to kind of really take the record for the most amount of pre-trained generative kind of transformer. So it gives you a lot of core capabilities. But what are these core capabilities? Well, I've kind of summarized them here because I didn't want to add loads more and new abbreviations, but to the left-hand side, you can kind of see that there's pretty much a generative AI for anything, even brain to text. So how do I leverage these? Now, there's a great AI collection on GitHub, which indexes every single one of the items here. And a few of these I'm going to be showing you today, like DALL-E, and some of the capabilities. I'm using things like Descript and Resemble now to do generate my own voice. We're obviously going to focus a little bit on GPT-3, but of course, there's pretty much one for everyone, right? And to make your kind of job a lot easier. Now, my friend Theo Priestley, when he did his last book about 5 years ago, said last year there was an app for that. This year, there's an AI for that. And I think we've now seen this commoditization of AI. And this has led to more leveraging more and more of these capabilities in applications. And you can probably see, and I know this is a bit of a joke with the kind of singularity kind of decrease, that there's a projection now that 2027 is the kind of area, obviously isn't linear, and it's probably going to be more like 2040, 2050. But you can see on the right hand side, and I'm sure you probably saw this over the Christmas period, this is a generative AI based image that's been created. So I fed it a few images, I think it was only 6, and it generated hundreds of images of which look quite realistic. So let's get a bit of hands-on with one of these. So I've give a quick example of just how you can just ask anything to GPT, and people have been doing this. I think the third richest persons in the world is just obsessed with using GPT to ask it absolutely anything. And of course, we've probably heard in the news that Microsoft have spent billions on being able to start utilizing GPT on Azure. And we've probably seen other people talking about it for testing, and we'll go through some of those examples. But, yes, it can create code, it can create, anything. And in essence, it's not just conversational AI, which is kind of what's been around for a long time, but actually now it's getting to that point where it's quite structured, and you can do more with it than just ask it questions about what the day is going to be next, what the weather's going to be, or something else. So what are the kind of use cases that we're talking about when it comes to testing? So I've put a few, and I'm going to give you some of these examples today so you can see how it fits together. So pretty much all of last year I was talking about Ada, after Ada Lovelace, who was actually was the first computer programmer, but she also lived and died just a few miles away from our R&D centres here in the UK. So this ability to automatically generate tests was kind of one of the first item that we were looking at. And I've been talking about Shift Right now for probably nearly 10 years. So in just give you an idea of how long that's taken to get into a reality. And then the next one, which is something I spend a lot of time talking to Paul Gerard about with, requirements engineering, and okay, how do we potentially look at content sensitive validation, understanding domain knowledge, which could be inferred by ChatGPT. So how do you test derivatives, etc., etc. Again, a lot in the predictive ALM space, and at the start of last year, I did a book on artificial intelligence in software testing with Rex Black and Adam Smith, who sits on quite a lot of the AI for testing ISO boards, and has actually created an ALM out of predictive ALM out of Barcelona, and so it can kind of show you and predict in the future, how many defects you're going to have. And I know this is a technique people have done many years anyway. The other big thing from last year was really around creating this quality certification kind of for your software. So, it's got a B, it needs to get A. These are the things you can do to improve it. So exec scorecard, kind of quality lifecycle management or quality stream management, depending on how you want to look at it. The automation test automation, so autonomously generating code and the associated test artifacts. I'll be showing you that today, and then also transferring your knowledge from single points of failure within your business and how you can express that. And then another great generative AI image of what's been created. So you probably, unless you've been in that bunker, you've probably seen a lot of messages on LinkedIn and the news and everywhere really talking about ChatGPT. I was talking with Jason about this. Is a bit of a hot topic. We did a book during lockdown, and part of it was, well, actually, it's now past its ISTQB foundation. So does that mean that it's a certified tester? Now, obviously, this is very controversial, so it's something we can discuss a little bit today. But this idea of it actually being able to sit an exam, and there's going to be some more examples further on through the presentation. But for it to be able to actually answer that and get to a point where it passed its score. Now, this is a real challenge, because you're kind of saying, well, can it make it, as James Whittaker would say, make it before it fakes it? Fake it before it makes it. Could potentially know more than we do, and this is a bit of a question, and definitely a controversial topic for many of us that are out there. So I talked about, I'm going to show you real examples of this, so you can kind of understand how could you potentially leverage that in your kind of everyday testing landscape. And you'll see that I put assisted AI testing. So I kind of refer to it as augmented intelligence or augmented testing, how it can help support you, whether you're doing, exploratory testing or some automated testing or performance, security, whatever it may be. So the first example I'm going to give you is auto generation of gherkin. We know ChatGPT can create a gherkin script, and we can then take that gherkin script and create it into a model. So model-based testing, again, back to the ISO 29119 Part 8, which I was on the committee for. How do you add in, create that model from just in essence a requirement, a business requirement? So I want a system, or I want this to do that. And then the next one's taking those stories, which is kind of generated in the background, and then actually generate the code. So what a developer would typically do, take the requirements, create some code, and then we get hold of that code and test it. So it creates the code. In this case, I'm going to use Copilot, and then we are able to test it. So we've got the model, now we've got the code, now we can auto-generate the tests. Okay, it can auto-generate Selenium, it can auto-generate other automation artifacts such as API tests, performance and security tests. So now it does all the testing, and then it deploys it. So it deploys it into production, and then back to the shift right viewpoint of it then takes all of that learning from open testing and then pulls that back into refining the models. And this infinite loop, in essence, is fully autonomous, but in our case, we're going to say it's assisted. So what requirement have I got? Well, I thought I spotted another post from Jason, and I kind of thought, oh, this is brilliant. And I did a book with Alan Page, experiences in software testing, about 10-15 years ago, with Dorothy Graham. So I thought, this is great. So he posted saying, another podcast episode, and he said, and Jason replied saying, is stock price a proxy for quality? So, does your stock price directly represent, the increase or decrease of the quality of the product? Now, we obviously know that's not exactly correct, but I thought, what, let's give it a go. And so I kind of went to ChatGPT and said, okay, generate me a gherkin story that will, show me the stock price of Microsoft over the last 12 months. And so I can validate that. And of course, then it created a given, when, then, and, very simple structure of how it can actually create and test that. Or create test driven development, or ATDD, from kind of the stuff from Elizabeth Hendrickson or Dan North, BDD stuff. So, okay, so it's created this gherkin syntax, which we're now going to see if we can prove this hypothesis that, stock price is directly related to quality, or at least disprove it. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is to model it. So in this case, I've just taken that exact Gherkin script and we've got a Gherkin to model-based testing converter. And now it's going to create, in essence, the harness, or at least a visual representation of what this will be testing and what this will be doing. And then that can auto-generate the code that's behind it to then test it. So we've got our model, we've got our Gherkin test. So now let's get some code. So obviously I've just loaded up Visual Studio Code, added in Copilot, and you can get a 60-day trial on this, so definitely worth doing. And then all I've done is literally type use Alpha Vantage API to get stock data and plot it in a graph. And straight away, it's gone to town and created me some code base. And the only thing that I've actually added in here is the API key, which I had to register to get a free account and therefore get an API key. So it's taken that API key and now it's auto-generated me some code. And thankfully, it's passing the symbol value, which is going to be the MSFT stock value, and it's going to output that into a data frame. So within seconds, it's now created the code that's going to go off to an API. It's going to pull the time series data, which you could have thrown into TickStack or, InfluxDB if you really wanted to, if you wanted a bit more sophisticated. But actually, in our case, we're just going to pull that time series data and then visualize it. So again, we put it straight out to a Panda data frame, and now we've got the stock price of Microsoft over a 12-month period. So we've created the requirements, we've created the code. The next bit will be, of course, the automation. Now, this is quite controversial, but again, I've just said to it, write me a Python Selenium script that will go onto Yahoo Finance, look for the Microsoft FT stock price and generate it. So it's come back straight away. The next one is I said, create me an API test that will also go off, take my API key, which you can see again, and generate me a request to go off and find and validate the stock price and whatever else I need to. So UI test, API test, both in the bag. Okay, so now I've got my my Selenium. Of course, I'm doing a bit of a replace because it's a slightly older version of WebDriver and Selenium. So I'm taking a script. In this case, I'm just going to use our Keysight.com, but I could have passed in that Selenium code that auto-generated as a Python file. And then what I'm doing is I'm actually just going to run it. So I'm not edited anything. And it's now executing on the system under test, which is on the right-hand side, which would have my built application there with the kind of the visual representation. And I could test the UI and the API from that system under test. And it can run it as soon as it's finished, give us some results. And that's it. So in theory, you've gone through all three stages from generation all the way through to testing, right? Incredibly complex, hopefully just a bit of an introduction to some of the technologies that you should be thinking about now. And of course, you can find out more, reach out to me, add some questions in now into the live Q&A, go to my LinkedIn page, which is linkedin.com/inautomation. It's like the easiest one in the world. Drop me a message. I'm always happy to help and save the world from bad software, as Joe kind of refers to me as this kind of automation cyborg. So hopefully you've enjoyed that. If you want to find out more, reach out and